All right, Knicks fans. New coach, new system, big expectations. But let's be real. Is this season about Coach Mike Brown's system working or the Knicks players making it work? We'll explain on this episode of From the Bench, a Knicks podcast. I'm Mike Spendley, former Knicks ball boy and longtime fan. My guest today might be able to shed some light on the question. Kelly Tripucka is a two-time All-Star with the Detroit Pistons, Utah Jazz, and Charlotte Hornets. He was a three-time All-American at Notre Dame and took the school to its first Final Four appearance. And in our home state of New Jersey, Kelly Tripucka was named the New Jersey Boys Basketball Player of the Century. I could go on, but we have a show to do here. Kelly, welcome to From the Bench, a Knicks podcast.
Hey, Mike, how you doing? It's great to be with you. Always a pleasure.
It's great to be with you too, my friend. What we're looking at here, and you know the history, we talked about it this summer, with Coach Tom Thibodeau gone and Mike Brown coming in, okay? Assuming and inheriting, I should say, a pretty good base team, okay? But he has implemented a new system. So I have a few questions on that, but similar to maybe what you got through, not in every area, but somewhat in Detroit. You played your first couple of years in Detroit, okay? You had some talent with you. Obviously, Isaiah, Bill Laimbeer, Vinnie Johnson. You had some talent. And all of a sudden, a guy that comes in, Chuck Daly. Did Chuck Daly implement a system? That's A. And B, with that system, how does it get grasped, and how do you implement it right away throughout the season?
Well, I mean, first of all, Mike, Chuck came in after Scotty Robertson was our coach, and we had a couple of good seasons. We had a young team. We had a team before Isaiah and I got there in 1981 that only won like 12 games or so. So it was more about trying to attract fans, start winning some ball games, get people interested with the talent, add some pieces like we did with a Vinnie Johnson, as you mentioned, trading for a Bill Laimbeer, and a Rick Mahorn later on, drafting a Joe Dumars. So the talent was certainly there. Now, Chuck was an assistant for the 76ers under Billy Cunningham. So when he got the job, we had to get used to him, and he had to get used to us. Now, certainly, he was trying to figure out what kind of talent do I have and what will work under what I want to do. And Chuck put in a lot of things that the Philadelphia 76ers were doing at the time. And, I think he met with each individual player, trying to get an idea what he wanted them to do, or what they felt comfortable to do. And then the long process was obviously different than it is today. We had training camp, which is a lot longer than it is nowadays. So, it's a process of trying to build on what you have, see what works, what your philosophy is as far as do we want to be a running team, do we want to try to get down, which we did in Detroit, try to score early without having to set up. And then if that didn't work right away, you went right into your offense. So Chuck was very good at handling players. He was, the old saying, a player's coach. And it was up to us to implement it. Chuck always said, look, coaches coach, players play. So he gave us that responsibility to run the system, to see how it worked, and then you progress as the season went along.
So when Daly came in, I heard you just say one of the systems was getting the ball up court quicker as opposed to maybe a slower half-court offense.
Correct.
That's exactly what Mike Brown has done to this point in the season. And quite frankly, I didn't believe that the Knicks could take that and run with it. And that's really not been a problem for them. I think they're third in the league in threes taken, and they weren't in the past. And they're also getting more possessions a game, sometimes up to 10, 12 more shots a game. So the Knicks are doing that. Tell me what happened with Daly when you did that in terms of your defense, though. What kind of philosophy he implemented there?
Well, again, it was trying to take away, layups always in the NBA. It's do not allow layups, do not allow dunks. So, you tried to pack in the middle. Threes, the game has changed so much, Mike, as you know, and that's a whole nother topic. There weren't many threes taken. It was more of a mid-range game. So You were trying to create some turnovers, and if you could create turnovers, you had a tremendous point guard, as the Knicks certainly do now, in Isaiah Thomas, and try to push the ball. And then you had to have guys, and this was a big if. You had the guys to be able to run with him. I was responsible for getting out of the wing. Another guy like a John Long or a Joe Dumars were responsible for getting out of the wing. And then you ran the court with three guys, and you had the trailers. And then if you didn't get a layup, you went right into early offense. And if the early offense obviously was stopped, that could lead you right into your half court set. So the main thing was try to score without running plays. And most of the time it worked. He gave you the freedom to be able to post up certain guys or to come off down screens on the wing. And then if not, there were like pin downs and whatever, you could go right into your early offense. And certainly we had the ability to do that because we had guys that could shoot, we had guys that could run, and we had a tremendous point guard, a Hall of Famer, obviously. So I can see what Mike Brown wants to do with a Jalen Brunson and some other guys that can run on the wing. But the way the game's played now is instead of running for layups like we did, they run for 3-point shots. If I'm wrong, I don't think so, because as you mentioned before, one of the stats is that they're one of the league leaders in 3-point attempts early on.
There's no question. So they've already seen that in terms of the Knicks, okay? But my question is this, now going back to your time, because there are some similarities here. Obviously, the game is different. You pointed that out. Obviously, you know way better than I in that respect. Does it have to be a complete buy-in from the team, or the leaders of the team, in this case, yourself, Isaiah Lambier, does that have to be across the board to take that system in, or is it just something you see as you develop as you go along? Because you guys were pretty successful. You finished 49-33 that first year with Daly, so it looks like you grasped a lot of what Daly brought in.
Oh, without a doubt, we grasped it, because if you look on later on after I was traded or whatever, they won a couple of championships. So obviously, you got to form your personnel, and a big reason for them, I think, getting over the top. Obviously, they had Lambier, they had Isaiah Thomas, they had a Joe Dumars, they had a Rick Mahorn. Then they drafted Sally and Rodman, and that just gave them depth or whatever. But you make a great point. It's a great question, Mike, because the way Chuck dealt with that, he said, let me talk to and get the best player thinking the same way I do, and he buys in. So he goes to Isaiah Thomas, and he says, this is what we want to do. I'm giving you the keys to the car, and it's up to you to make sure that the other guys buy in. So you always go to your best player, making sure that he thinks the same way you do, and then he's able to push that out to the other guys that everybody buys in. So it was very, very smart of Chuck, the way he coached, and I understood why he did that. And then it was up to Isaiah to not only execute it, but get that point across. He was the leader, and you followed the leader.
That's a great response. I love that answer, because a similar thing occurred here with the Knicks. Now, we all know Jalen Brunson, talented, but he's also talented as a captain, and you can see his influence rubs off on the other players. There was a game where they played their third consecutive road game, maybe their fifth game of the season, and they didn't play well. They played Chicago on a Sunday night. Chicago beat them up, okay? And after the game in the presser, Mike Brown came out and said, listen, I'm going to take blame for this loss, okay? I was all over the map with my substitutions, okay? The players are trying to grasp a new system, and I let them down because of the way I substituted. To me, it reminded me of a couple of times of what I heard Red Holzman do. Take the pressure off the team at the beginning, especially during the learning process. And what happened after that, Kel, was the next day Brunson said, listen, man, our coach has our back, so we're going to even work harder than we thought. So it was a ripple effect. He probably had to sit down with Brunson. Brunson brought it in, and they played much better since that. So that was a key thing, which I think it looks like Daly used as well with you guys.
Smart. No, without a doubt. It sounds like Chuck Daly. Exactly. Chuck would take the blame. He knew when to speak and when, you knew when he was upset. It's the same way in practice. He didn't want to be there for 3 hours. Chuck was a guy that said, look, there's a time to play and there's a time to have fun. We can get this done in an hour and a half. We put in the work. You guys can go home early, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, that was always appreciated. Certainly a long season, a long year with traveling and things like that. But there's no question that Chuck knew when to ring the bell and put it on the players. And then other times when he would take the blame. And certainly the players appreciated that because then they understood that, like Jalen Brunson, you just mentioned, that coach has got our back. But he, as a leader, still has to sit there and say, hey, guys, we're not going to take advantage of him, and he's not going to take advantage of us. We have to be in this together. We have to think the same way.
Yeah, it's really an interesting concept, and I know that it was more talked about at the beginning of the season. Some of that talk has died down, but I find it really interesting from a construction of a team point of view. So that's why we're bringing it up. So I guess it begs to the question what I brought up in the open. Do you think it's more the coach's system working, or in your case, and in this current case, the Knicks, and in your case, the Pistons, is it the players making it work? Is there give and take as we go along with the new system?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of both. I really do. I mean, you've got to buy in. I mean, that always has to be. You got to buy in. You got to believe, and you got to give it a chance. Now, you have to run it the correct way, and you can't just say, well, we're going to give it a week and that's it. This is a system, or any system, that takes months. I mean, you're going to see highs and lows or whatever, but if he's confident enough in the system and your best player buys in and he believes, then it's up to him to execute and to get his teammates to execute that system. Now, during the course of the first few months, as you mentioned before, they might have laid an egg. They might have some good games, some bad games, and that could be related to something other as far as injuries, tired. The other team was just better. I mean, you got to follow the ebb and flow here. But at the same time, if you continue to work at that system and believe in that system, and you execute that system, they should have no problems. I mean, how good they're going to be, who knows? But at the same time, it's up to those players, as I mentioned earlier. They play. Don't put this all on the coach. You have to execute it, and you're the one that plays. So don't look over at the bench for instructions half the time, because if you know what you're doing, then it's up to you to execute that system.
Last part of this question. The first year you actually went 49-33 with the new coach, with the new system, and a young team. You lose to the Knicks in a 5-game series. The following year you come back, still have a good record. You're 46-36. How was it to come back? Now, as the season progressed, you guys played tough. You swept New Jersey and then lost to the good Larry Bird Paris team in 6 games.
True.
What was your mindset with everybody back for that second year after doing pretty much, for the most part, what Daly brought in, Kelly?
Now there's expectations. We were, 3 years earlier, as I mentioned, before Isaiah and I got there, and that first round, 2 first-round draft picks that, the Detroit Pistons were the laughing stock of the league and didn't win very many games and weren't drawing any people. Now you got people coming, and we improved, and Chuck comes in, and you go to the playoffs. Now all of a sudden it's back on. You're like, hey, you like playing, but there's expectations. It can't be a one-time thing. You have to improve on that and get better. We may not have gotten better as far as the number of wins, but we won a first-round playoff and then got to the second round, and so it's like steps, Mike. It's building blocks and whatever. We lost to, obviously, one of the best teams in the league in the Boston Celtics with Larry and Kevin and Robert and whatever. But we knew that now, okay, people are going to look at us differently because now we become the hunted instead of the hunter, because we are now known as one of the up-and-coming teams. So you've got to meet that fire with fire and be prepared to play those top-notch teams, whether it's the Celtics, whether it's the Lakers, whether it's the 76ers, whether it's the Knicks at that time. So the expectation, but that's how you want to play as a professional athlete. That's what you want. You want to play at the highest level.
That's why I say that to all fans that we talk about. And what I saw. When the Knicks won their championships in the early 70s, it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. Okay. They ended up losing to Boston in the Eastern Conference. Okay. In 6 games. They came back. They had DeBusschere. That made a huge difference. Okay. But it is a process. And really, in Detroit, now you had been traded to Utah, but when the Pistons won, it was literally 5 to 6 years after Daly got there.
Yeah.
And I tell that to people here because, listen, Thibodeau got them to a certain level, and it was management's decision to bring in a guy they thought that could get them over the hump. But really, it's a process. It was very unusual last year to see a young team like Oklahoma City win without having to go through the losses of an Eastern Conference or a Western Conference final or a second round exit, which you really grow from. So the pressure, especially in New York, that this coach has is unbelievable. Way more than most coaches have coming into a team, inheriting a good team even. Big time pressure on Mike Brown.
Yeah, no, I agree. And again, we go back to that the game is different back when I played versus now. I mean, you talk about when the Pistons finally were able to get to the point where they got to the finals and then won finals. They had to go through. It's like the same teams every time to succeed. They had to figure out a way to get by the Boston Celtics and then later on get by the Chicago Bulls. And then the Bulls were the same way. They had to try to get by the Detroit Pistons. Then it was a matter of how do we figure out how to get by the Los Angeles Lakers and the thing. So I'm not sure in this era they have the same rivalries or teams to be able to get through on a consistent basis. But like you've been around a long time. You look back at those teams, it was the same teams every year getting to the Eastern Conference Finals or Western Conference Finals. And it's like, you have to, take your shot and try to get by them in order to ever have a chance to win a championship. And that's how it was with the Knicks. Maybe they just have to get by themselves, but at the same time, when you think about moving further in the playoffs, there's more pressure. The spotlight is bigger, and you've got to come through a lot more times. And eventually, they hope that they'll be able to get over that last hurdle and maybe get themselves back to another chance to win a championship.
It's funny because it's always about who's in your conference. You can say our goal is the finals. For many years in the 90s, I thought that the Knicks were the second best team in the Eastern Conference, but they had to get past the greatest basketball player that puts sneakers on, okay?
Yeah.
And every time, what the result was. The Knicks are getting a little bit of a break this year in that Boston is not the same, less Jason Tatum, and Halliburton out for Indiana. So the East is opened up, and in that same breath, you have young teams like even Chicago, Detroit, and Orlando that it's not going to be easy to get past them. So you have to take one game at a time, 1 week at a time, especially with a new coaching system. And the game, you reflected on it, the game is so much different. Can you imagine some of the players now that are driving down the lane untouched, going up for baskets? Mahorn would have knocked him down. Oakley would have knocked him down. There's plenty of players, okay? So the game is completely different. I certainly understand, especially coming from you, a guy that played in the 80s, buddy.
Yeah, no, it's a wide open game now. Like I said, you mentioned Oklahoma City. They had a great year last year. They won it all. And you're right, they didn't have any record of having to get through somebody to get there. They just won it. But again, the 3-point shot, the wide open, the one-on-one, the lane is cleared out. It's just a different game. I'm not an expert as far as trying to figure out versus when I played. You knew no layups allowed. That's how it was. So, and if you tried to go in there, whether you were Michael Jordan or Larry Bird or Isaiah Thomas or whatever, John Stockton or Carmelo, you were going to get, end up on the floor. You had to earn your points. So in this era, with the way the game is played, and certainly younger teams, as you mentioned, with Tatum being out and Indiana not having their best player, some of these young teams show up, and the way they play, they have no fear. So it's a different route, but the Knicks are trying to build some continuity, I would think, and that's always a good thing in my mind. But it's up to the players to be able to execute it and to figure out what needs to be better in order to get to that next step.
So I guess the analysis is it's really what we talked about in the open. It's really a combination of all things. You cannot implement a system unless there's a little give and take. I think new coaches come in and they outline this system, and they're hoping that even if one third of it is adapted, that they'll be in better shape. The upbeat tempo, this sort of thing. You can't, I don't believe, implement a system that's going to be taken verbatim every word and play, because players are players and they're going to put their own strengths and their own weaknesses. One thing, and I watched every game, every minute of every game, the Knicks are not a good perimeter defensive team. Okay, they play drop back defense, they double. Okay, the problem with the Knicks is their best two offensive players, arguably, are the ones that are most challenged on defense. So on the rotations back out to the 3-point line, when they drop back and double, they're slow to get back. And I believe they're 29th in the league on perimeter defense. That's going to have to be, I'm not saying it has to be fixed 100%. Every team has weaknesses, but they're definitely going to have to improve on that part of the game. Part of the game that really wasn't around when you were playing. I know the 3-point came in, but it's a whole thing of playing defense now on the perimeter.
Oh, yeah, no, it's really important. I mean, again, when you look at the statistics and you see the number of 3-point shots are taken, I mean, most nights, half the shots that are taken as a team are 3-point shots. Doesn't mean that they always shoot them well, but sometimes it's even more than half. But at the same time, with the way the offenses are spread out, it's all about spacing. You've got to be able to cover up that space, and that takes a lot, because if you're going to double at a certain point, as you mentioned, ball movement is going to end up beating the defense. If you're a good passing team and can swing the ball from one side to the other, you're going to get an open look. And the Knicks have to figure out, I would assume, that they want to be better on the perimeter, particularly as this season goes on and into the playoffs, because if that's a weakness, it's hurt them in the past. It could hurt them again. But as you mentioned, it's the players make those plays. They have to make those adjustments. And as you said, it's not set in stone. It's a give and take. It's trial and error as far as the system is concerned. But I would assume that the players all agree that if that continues, that's something that's going to be hurtful in the end that they've got to improve on.
Absolutely. Let me ask you this before we close. You're down in Florida for a time. You miss New Jersey. You miss the family. Talk to me about your relationship with Jersey at this point in your life.
Well, again, it's always been home. It was a great place to grow up. A lot has changed politically, and you can name a few other things as far as the weather is concerned. And during the winter, I don't miss that. But most of my family is still back in New Jersey, and I go back to play golf. I belong to a club, Rockaway River, up in Denville, New Jersey, and that's still home for the summer. My wife loves the beach. We have a place down in Spring Lake Heights, and so Jersey is still there, but I really enjoy Florida a lot. We're residents down here now, and that's more or less home now. But hey, you can take the kid out of Jersey. You can't take Jersey out of the kid.
Well, you also you come from a tremendous family. I happen to know a few other family members. It was a pleasure to talk to you. I hope we can discuss the Knicks down the road with you on occasion. I certainly appreciate you spending the time with us on From the Bench and Knicks podcast. You're a great guy and have some fantastic insights on basketball. I love every one of them, Kelly.
Well, Mike, you're a legend. I miss you over at Forest Hill and a couple of other friends that belong over there, and it's always a pleasure. I always enjoy talking to them when I came over to play and with Nicky Matson and whatever. But at the same time, I love your loyalty to the Knicks. You have a long history, and it's my pleasure to always be with you.
Well, thank you very much. Our guest today, Kelly Tripucka, sharing his insight on a new system that was implemented with a Hall of Fame coach in Chuck Daly with the Pistons. Kelly, thanks so much for being with us, and we'll talk to you down the road, my friend.
My pleasure, Mike. Thank you.
Thanks for watching From the Bench. And if you've liked what you've seen, we will be offering a members club of From the Bench called In the Huddle. Please send us your email, and we'll send you out all the information. Go to michaelspenley.com and leave us your email address, and we'll get everything that you need to get in that club. With an In the Huddle membership, you'll get viewing on all of our live events, interviews with Hall of Fame Knicks, and discounted merchandise. Please contact us at michaelspenley.com. leave us your email, and we'll take care of the rest.